There is a particular kind of exhaustion that is not physical. You cannot sleep it off, you cannot cure it with a holiday, and you cannot massage it out of your muscles. It lives in the bones, yes, but also in the spaces between your thoughts. It is the exhaustion of having carried the world's weather inside your own chest for so long that you no longer know where the world ends and you begin. And if you are the kind of person who feels deeply, who absorbs the moods of a room before a single word is spoken, who finds themselves apologizing for the discomfort of others as if it were your own mistake, then you know this exhaustion intimately. You have likely spent a lifetime being told that your sensitivity is a gift, and perhaps it is, but right now it does not feel like a gift. It feels like a wound that has never been allowed to heal because you keep picking at the scabs of other people's pain. We are here to explore what happens when a person like that, an empath, finally stops caring. But we must be careful with that word, caring, because what we are really talking about is not the cessation of love or the death of compassion. What we are talking about is the moment when the endless, involuntary, and often unrecognized obligation to absorb, to fix, to soothe, and to manage the emotional states of everyone around you finally comes to a halt. It is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival, and it is one of the most misunderstood and lonely transitions a human being can undergo. To understand this moment, we have to first understand the soil from which this kind of caring grows. It does not appear in a vacuum. This capacity to feel so much, to be so attuned to others, is almost always born in an environment where attunement was necessary for survival. Think back. Perhaps you were the child of a parent who was emotionally unpredictable, or perpetually sad, or quietly furious. Perhaps you learned very early on that your own needs, your own feelings, were secondary or even invisible. What mattered was the state of the parent. If they were sad, you had to cheer them up. If they were angry, you had to become small and still. If they were fragile, you had to tiptoe. Your nervous system learned before you had words for it that safety lay in prediction and pacification. You learned to read the micro-expressions, to feel the shift in the atmosphere, to know what was needed before it was asked for. This was not an act of love in the purest sense. It was an act of survival. And it worked. You survived. But the cost of that survival was that your own self became somewhat of a ghost. Your feelings were not as important as the feelings of the powerful adults. Your needs were an inconvenience. Your anger, your sadness, your joy, these things had to be managed, hidden, or reshaped to fit the emotional landscape that others demanded. And so you grew up, not as a fully embodied person, but as a kind of emotional radar system, constantly scanning, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to create peace in the external world because the internal world was too chaotic or too dangerous to inhabit. And then you carry this radar system into adulthood. You bring it to your friendships, where you become the listener, the advisor, the one who holds everyone else's secrets but has no one to hold yours. You bring it to your romantic relationships, where you confuse intensity with intimacy, and you find yourself drawn to people who need to be fixed, rescued, or soothed, because that is the only form of connection your nervous system recognizes as real. You bring it to your work, where you are the reliable one, the calm one, the one who smooths over conflicts and anticipates problems before they arise. And you do all of this, not because you are a saint, but because it is the only way you know how to be in the world. Your identity is built on this scaffolding of service and sensitivity. But here is the psychological truth that is rarely spoken. This kind of caring is not always clean. It is often entangled. It is often a way of seeking control in an uncontrollable world. It is a way of earning love because you were not taught that you are worthy of love simply by existing. It is a way of ensuring that you will not be abandoned, because if you are indispensable, if you are the one holding everything together, then surely no one will leave. And so your caring becomes a transaction, though you would never admit it to yourself. You give, and in the deepest, most hidden part of your soul, you expect that someday someone will finally see you and give back. But they rarely do, because you have become so good at giving, so seamless in your support, that others assume you need nothing. You become invisible in your own life. And this is where the exhaustion becomes something more. It becomes a quiet despair. It is the feeling of being in a crowded room, surrounded by people you love, and yet feeling completely alone. It is the moment when someone unloads their latest crisis on you, and you feel not compassion, but a cold, creeping resentment that shocks you with its intensity. It is the realization that you have spent your entire life filling other people's cups, and now you are standing in the middle of the desert, parched, holding an empty vessel. So what happens when the empath finally stops caring? The first thing that happens is often a profound and terrifying silence. It is the silence that comes when you finally stop scanning the room. You stop monitoring the emotional temperature. You stop anticipating the needs of others, and in that silence, you hear something you have been avoiding for decades, your own voice. And at first, that voice is not kind. It is a voice of deep, aching grief. It is the voice of the child you once were asking, "But who was there for me?" It is the voice of the teenager who swallowed their pain to avoid burdening others. It is the voice of the adult who gave and is now empty. This silence is not peaceful. It is a wasteland, and you are standing in it, wondering who you are without all the roles you have been playing. You might mistake this silence for numbness. You might think you have stopped caring, but what is actually happening is that your nervous system, which has been in a state of hyperarousal for as long as you can remember, is finally collapsing into a kind of protective shutdown. It is not that you do not feel. It is that you have felt too much for too long, and the circuits have blown. The empath who stops caring is not becoming cold. They are becoming overwhelmed to the point of paralysis. They are finally, after all these years, listening to the body's desperate signal that enough is enough. In this state, you may find yourself pulling away from people. You may stop answering calls. You may find that you have no capacity for the dramas and the complaints that once consumed your attention. You may feel a sharp, almost aggressive boundary rise up inside you when someone begins to vent. And this can be deeply frightening, because your entire identity has been built on being the one who is there. So when you step back, you are not just changing a behavior. You are shattering the story you have told yourself about who you are. You are facing the possibility that if you are not the caretaker, you are nothing. But this is the crucial turning point. This moment of not caring, of pulling back, of boundary setting, is not the destination. It is the doorway. And on the other side of that doorway is not a life of coldness or indifference. On the other side is the possibility of true caring for the first time. Because true caring, genuine compassion, can only come from a place of wholeness. It can only come from a self that is full, not empty. It can only come when you are giving from your overflow, not from your lifeblood. Think of it this way. For the empath, caring has been like breathing. It has been automatic, involuntary, and necessary for survival. But when you care automatically, you have no choice. And without choice, there is no love. Love, real love, is a choice. It is a conscious decision to be present with another person's suffering, not because you are compelled to by your own history, but because you have the capacity and the desire to do so. When you stop the automatic caring, you are reclaiming your choice. You are saying, "I will no longer be a sponge for the world's pain. I will no longer let my empathy be a weapon used against myself. I will now decide, consciously, where and how and with whom I offer my attention." This reclamation is not easy. It is a process of withdrawal, and like any withdrawal, it comes with cravings and pains. You will feel guilty. You will feel selfish. You will feel the pull to go back, to fix things, to make everyone comfortable again. The people in your life, the ones who have benefited from your endless giving, may not understand. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming cold, of not being the person they once knew, and they are right, in a way. You are changing. You are becoming someone who is no longer willing to be a repository for their unprocessed emotions. This can lead to a great deal of loneliness, because the relationships that were built on the old dynamic, the dynamic of taker and giver, may not survive the transition. And that is a grief that must be honored. It is the grief of losing connections that were perhaps never truly reciprocal. It is the grief of seeing that some people loved what you did for them more than they loved who you are. As you move through this withdrawal, you will begin to encounter feelings that you have suppressed for a very long time. Anger, for one. Deep, seething, righteous anger. You may be surprised by the intensity of it. You may be ashamed of it. But this anger is not your enemy. It is a signal. It is the part of you that knew all along that the deal was unfair. It is the part of you that was furious every time you were taken for granted, every time your pain was dismissed, every time you had to smile when you were falling apart inside. Allowing yourself to feel this anger without acting on it destructively is a vital part of the process. It is the fire that burns away the old patterns of people-pleasing and self-abandonment. It clears the ground for something new, and what grows in that cleared ground is not a hardened heart. It is a heart that has learned to beat for itself first. It is a heart that understands that you cannot pour from an empty cup, not because it is a nice saying, but because it is a physiological and psychological fact. You begin to develop a new kind of awareness. You start to notice the difference between empathy and enmeshment. You start to see that you can hold space for someone's pain without taking it into your own body and making it your own. You can say, "I hear you, and that sounds incredibly difficult," without feeling that you have to solve it, carry it, or be consumed by it. This is a skill. It is a muscle that must be built, and it is built in the small moments, the moments when you pause before responding, the moments when you ask yourself, "Is this mine to carry? Is this a request for connection or a demand for my energy?" This new way of being also requires a radical honesty with yourself. You must begin to examine your own motivations. Why are you so quick to offer help? Is it truly compassion, or is it a way to feel needed, to feel worthy, to avoid the emptiness of your own company? Why do you feel responsible for the happiness of others? Is it because you genuinely want them to be happy, or is it because their unhappiness makes you anxious? These are uncomfortable questions. They peel back the layers of our self-deception, but they are necessary, because until you understand the roots of your own compulsive caring, you will always be at risk of falling back into it. There is also a profound loneliness that accompanies this new clarity. When you stop absorbing the world's emotions, you become more aware of your own. And your own emotions, having been neglected for so long, can feel vast and overwhelming. You may realize that you have been using other people's problems as a way to distract yourself from your own pain. Without that distraction, you're left alone with yourself. And for someone who has spent a lifetime looking outward, being alone with oneself can feel like being trapped in a room with a stranger. This is the time for gentleness. This is the time for self-compassion, a concept that may feel foreign and even selfish to you, but it is essential. You must learn to speak to yourself the way you have always spoken to others. You must learn to hold your own pain with the same tenderness you have offered to the world. And as you do this, something shifts. The world starts to look different. You begin to see people not as projects to be fixed, but as fellow travelers on a difficult road. Your interactions become lighter. You are no longer carrying the weight of their unspoken expectations. You can laugh more easily. You can walk away from conversations without feeling drained. You can be in a room with someone who is suffering and feel genuine compassion without feeling that you are suffering with them. This is not detachment. This is presence. This is the ability to be fully with another person in their moment of pain without losing yourself in it. And paradoxically, this kind of presence is far more healing for them than your old style of rescue. Because when you're not trying to fix them, you are communicating without words that you believe they are capable of handling their own life. You are offering them the dignity of their own struggle. What happens when an empath finally stops caring is that they do not stop caring at all. They stop surviving and start living. They stop reacting and start responding. They stop being a mirror for everyone else's emotions and start becoming a source of their own light. The energy that was once scattered in 1,000 directions, trying to hold up the sky for everyone around them, is finally gathered back into the self, and with that energy, they begin to build a life that is authentically theirs. They discover passions that were not borrowed from others. They discover a capacity for joy that is not dependent on the moods of those around them. They discover that they are not, in fact, empty without the roles they once played. They are full. They have always been full. They were just too busy giving themselves away to notice. The final stage of this journey is not a destination, but an ongoing practice. It is the daily choice to stay centered in yourself. It is the daily practice of checking in with your own body, your own feelings, your own needs, before you engage with the world. It is the quiet strength of saying no when every fiber of your being wants to say yes, because you know that yes will cost you a piece of yourself. It is the wisdom to recognize that the most compassionate thing you can do for the world is to be a whole, healthy, and grounded human being. Because a world full of people who are burning themselves out for others is a world on fire. A world full of people who are tending to their own flame is a world that is lit from within. So if you are in that place of exhaustion, that place where you feel you cannot care for one more moment, do not be afraid. Do not believe the voices that tell you that you are becoming cold or selfish. What you are becoming is real. You are shedding a skin that has been too tight for too long. You are entering a wilderness where you will have to learn to survive on your own resources, and it will be hard, but it is in that wilderness that you will find yourself, not the self you built to survive your childhood, not the self you crafted to be loved, but the self that was always there, underneath the layers of duty and obligation and fear. That self is waiting for you, and when you finally meet them, you will find that they have a tremendous capacity for love. But this time, it is a love that begins at home. This time, it is a love that includes you, and from that place, the caring you offer to the world will not be a burden. It will be a gift, freely given, freely received, and never at the expense of your own soul.